What's up and welcome back to Cleats to Whistle podcast. I am Brad Valdez. That guy over at the end is Kevin Watson. He is the co-host. Welcome, Mike Jackson, DeSales head football coach here in Louisville, Kentucky. Excited to have you on, Coach.
Excited to be here.
I always ask this question first, okay? And we all have that past. Go ahead and show some love to your mentors.
Yeah, well, I mean, my mentors are really any coach that ever coached me. And whether I learned what to do or maybe sometimes some things maybe not to do. And we all kind of grew up in the old days when we didn't get water at practice. And we prayed for rain so it would get a mud puddle on the field.
Yes, sir.
Hey, tackle me over by that thing. I'm thirsty. But, yeah, every one of my high school coaches played for Cotton Adams at Corbin, legendary coach. I'll talk a little bit about Corbin as we move through. But my college coach, Joe McDaniel, is a legend at Center College. And then, getting into the coaching game, I coached under Tom Duffy, who is a very well-known character, not just coach, but in the state of Kentucky, but state championship level coach. And I said, I want to go to a place where I'm learning from somebody that knows what they're doing. And I was fortunate to get on that staff. Told me I would have a varsity position. I interviewed for the job, got a teaching job. That day, I went down to see Coach Duffy. Said, I gave that job away about 30 minutes ago. You can coach the junior high. So that was a little bit of a surprise. But
welcome.
Yeah, it was at Henderson County. It was his first year there, and he didn't know what all his staff situation was going to be, and it wasn't his fault. But I was the new guy on the block, and you go down there and coach the junior high. We were not very good at that junior high level, and learned humility, I think, more than anything that year, which was great. But it also forced me to take a head coaching role way before I was ready. I was 23 years old, and I didn't know it, but 3 years later, I would become a high school varsity head coach. And if it had not been for having that thrust
blessing
upon
in disguise.
Me, it really was. I learned how to manage people, learned how to manage equipment, learned how to manage kids, learned how to manage parents.
That's a great story.
And I didn't do very well at any of those, but I had a lot to learn from. And so Tom Duffy sort of was, I guess I would call Tom Duffy my first sort of mentor. And I learned the wing tee, the old school wing tee offense, and he was as basic and bare bones as you get. I asked for a playbook my first day I got in there. He said, well, here you go. And he threw me the Ted Kimsky book, the old book, Delaware wing tee and order of football, blue cover. And he said, read this. That's our offense. And I said, well, I guess you don't create anything on your own in this game. So anyway, I learned under Duffy. And then my buddy, Jim McKee, who I went to college with at center, he played offensive line. I was on the offensive side, and we were fraternity brothers. And he got the head coaching job at Oldham County, and he said, come on over here. You run the offense. I said, are you sure? I don't have 1 minute of high school varsity experience. He said, I trust you. I know you know football. And gave me the offense. I called plays that first year up in the booth and learned a whole lot. And we went 10-0 in the regular season after they'd gone 3-8 the year before. And had a good run. Lost in the first round of playoffs. We didn't really know what we were doing. We were fortunate to have a good schedule. But we started to build a little tradition there. McKee left on. I guess you would say he was sort of my first mentor, really. I learned a lot of offense from Tom Duffy, not a lot about managing a program because I was at the junior high. But under Jim, it was kind of he and I doing everything, off-season, film study, weekends, everything. It was a two-man show. We had a great staff, but we had great guys on the staff. Tom Moore, actually, PRP guy, who was really, really good, great line coach. Wow. But Jim and I did most of the tactical stuff, and I was forced to learn a whole lot of football that 1 year.
Jim McKee's he's just a dude, man.
Yeah, he's a dude.
He is a character, like you said, a character.
Very much.
He knows what he's doing,
and he does. And Jim was a very wing tee oriented guy, and that's all we ran. I talked him into having a 3-step game, to do something besides waggle in the pass game, and we were able to throw the ball a little bit. We had a kid named Jimmy Dan Myers who was our quarterback.
Oh, yeah. And
Jimmy Dan ended up going to Kentucky Wesleyan and broke all kinds of Division II passing records. Well,
coming from wing T school.
Jim and I, we always say we're the only coaches in America that could hold Jimmy Dan Myers under 1,000 yards in the season. He did a great job faking and carried out fakes, and that's what we drilled into him. And somehow he got away from us and did great things. He's a great person, great man today. Anyway, so Jim goes on to Scott County, kind of got his dream job, still there today. 30 years later, and that opened the job up for me. He gave me a great recommendation to the principal, who she wasn't much of a football person, I don't think, and she just kind of took his recommendation, said, I don't want to open up a bunch of interviews, and gave it to me, and got real fortunate. We had some success at Oldham County. We were able to maintain that and become a top 10 program where they had never really had a lot of football success since the mid-'80s, I guess. And so that, and from there, ended up, I guess I would also count some other people, I don't know if you call them mentors, a little bit more colleagues, but I was a head coach for about 20 years, and then my son decided he wanted to get into football. And what it's like as a coach, you don't really raise your kids very much. And
yeah, exactly.
And he was getting into middle school age, and I won't say he was acting up, but he just needed a male figure in his life more than I was able to do. And being home at 9, 10 o'clock at night wasn't working. And so he said, when he said, I want to play football, Dad, I said, well, wherever you play, I'm going to coach. And of course, he wanted to go to Trinity. The evil empire.
He could have picked a worse place.
But it was a great experience. Great experience for him. And, I knew Andrew Coverdale, for years going back and coaching against each other. They had respect for me and, for what.
Hey, this guy's been with some unbelievable offensive minds.
Yeah.
I mean, he's named 3 Hall of Famers. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
You talk about offensive mind.
It's going to come back full circle. We'll talk about this season a little bit. I don't know we're going to get into much, but anything that we did this year was all because of the people that I was fortunate to be around, and including Bob Beatty, who's now in the Hall of Fame.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. No. And this is actually a phenomenal opening of a podcast, man, because you are dropping so many names and knowledge, and it's unbelievable because this is what I love. I love getting to know you and where you've been. So with you just talking, man, I'm enjoying it.
Oh, he's been some places, man.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Well, it's a great first question because, as all coaches, most coaches, I think 99% of us will tell you, it's not about us. We don't create anything. We didn't invent anything. Everything's stolen, and we rarely ever give credit, but we should. And you ask about mentors. I think it's a great place to start. We're all from different trees, and I got to also mention my son only played football for the 1 year at Trinity. So that happened to be a year Rondell Moore was on the team, and I was working with the offense, so we got to win state championship.
Tough problem to have.
Yeah, that was nice. By the way, one of the hardest working, most talented kids I've been around.
I think he's one of the most underrated high school football players in the state of Kentucky. For him to be underrated is saying something because he's probably one of the best players. I mean, if he'd have played all 4 years here and really got to know him, I mean, he's like the Tim Tebow of I mean, he's really that good.
And
a lot of people didn't know how good he was.
Well, he's blessed with such talent.
Oh, yeah.
But the kid stayed after practice 15, 20 minutes every practice working on routes. Coach, can I get this little drill better?
How much stronger did that kid get?
Oh, Lord. Well, he squatted.
Oh, if it's 500 or 600 pounds?
He was squatting over 500 in high school. Yeah, I was there that day. That was crazy.
Jeez.
But anyway, I got to also mention, after my son stopped playing football their freshman year, decided to wrestle, which was a great move for him. But that allowed me to get into some other things. I took the job at Seneca for a year. That was going to be a 5-6 year commitment. I wasn't going to be able to resurrect that before I retired and stepped down from that. But the job opened up at Mail to do offense. And I didn't want to become a head coach again because of the time that entails, because my son was still wrestling and I wanted to travel with him and be involved in that. So I wanted to take an assistant job. And fortunately, a good friend of mine, Chris Wolf, was the head coach. Keith Eckloff had been my offensive coordinator at Ballard and was at Mail at that time. And he decided to go over and take the Seneca job. Well, that opened up the job at Mail, and it just worked. And I got to coordinate offense at Mail for 3 years with some tremendous athletes. And Chris Wolf is, I don't need to say a whole lot more than his name.
I've always said he's an offense savant. I
mean,
he
does a great job on both sides
of the ball. He is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
The data and the stuff that he keeps in his head is unbelievable.
And it's interesting you said that. So I've taken bits and pieces from everything. I've got a wing T background, which today for me in the offense we run means I can run gap scheme. And, it's not all inside zone, but I didn't really know the zone game that much. So I knew it to coach against it, but I didn't really know the inside of it.
Ins and outs.
So getting the Mail and being able to really dig into that, but also not just that, but the tactical part of data analysis. And you mentioned it with Chris. Chris is a very intelligent person.
Oh, absolutely.
But a lot of data study and why do we run what we run? And it's not just calling plays on field. I've always kind of been that way, but Chris takes it to a different level.
Why are you running it?
Yeah. And he really does a good job with that part of it, and that just really appealed to me. And I was, in a way, it was unfortunate to get a head coaching job at 27 because I didn't sort of, learn the trade under somebody and learn all of those going back, I wish I'd have been under maybe 3 or 4 other successful head coaches. But getting that chance to go back, be under Coach Beatty, seeing how he managed players and just a magic touch.
Some of the guys you've worked with, I mean, there's a lot of people out there like,
yeah.
Some of these, I mean,
I was blessed.
Really?
And
wow.
The thing is, I couldn't have gotten the jobs I got.
Did you work on under anybody that wasn't a Hall of Famer? I mean, that's crazy.
No, I've been very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
But I probably could have not gotten those jobs at Trinity or Male unless I'd been a head coach and had some success there.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It all goes hand in hand.
All kinds of work. So.
And it's not like you didn't know what you were doing. I mean,
well, but iron sharpens iron.
That's right.
And it really did stretch me as a coach to force me into learning some things. And I knew the gap scheme run game. And at Ballard, we had done some things off of the wing tee, away from it.
Well, if Coach McKee, Coach Beatty, Coach Wolf have your respect, you know what you're doing. Yeah. They're not just going to bring some guy off the street that doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, and that's a testament to you. Those are great guys to work under, but that speaks a lot for you knowing what you're doing.
Well, and that's another thing too is dealing with the pressure. You know what I mean? You being a head coach so young, so you had to deal with the pressure of being that, and then now being in a room with a bunch of great men that, that you respect and they respect you. You know what I mean? You had that stress of, okay, I got to get this game plan in, right? How did you deal, with that?
I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit of a control freak, and so I don't do the defense usually. I really have to rely on having a great defensive coordinator, and it, if it were up to me, I'd probably try to do all three aspects, and I've had to do that before, and it's not very successful. Mm-hmm. It's just football is too complex a game. There's too many moving parts. There's too much to do on Friday night, but there's way too much to do through the week. It's a 7-day-a-week job.
Friday's the easy part.
Friday is the easy part. Hayes in the barn, and so I would tend to try to take everything on, and I learned a lot by doing and learned a lot by making mistakes and trial and error, and especially in the special teams. So I've always been able to kind of corral the offense and the special teams and the management part, the off-season part. It's just I'm passionate about the off-season stuff. I love the special teams part. I like defense too, but I know I better shove that off on somebody else that really knows what they're doing.
It's the old saying, you don't win state championships in November, you win them in the off-season.
Well,
I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah, we're trying to get there.
It really is.
Yeah, and our kids at DeSales have done a great job.
Yeah, one thing about the DeSales kids, they're hard workers.
They've really gotten
They really
after
are.
it. Yeah,
They're good. They're good kids, and they come from good families that really push them, and you can tell it in the weight room. I mean, those kids get after it in the weight room.
Very, very blessed to be where I am and work with the kind of kids I get to work with.
Wow. This has been a 10 minutes of opening podcast that is just – it's phenomenal, Coach, and I appreciate you for coming. So you said you grew up in Corbin. You know what I mean? Your first days of playing football, man. What was that like?
I don't remember my first days of playing football in Corbin. Whenever you're born, and I actually was born in Louisville. My dad worked at GE, but they moved back to Corbin when I was 2 or 3. But in Corbin, when you're born, some kids get blankets in other places. We get footballs, and you're born with a football in your hand pretty much. So I don't know my first day of playing football in Corbin. It was probably the first day we drove into town, and you were kind of forced into it.
Yeah, I love it.
There were basketball goals, I think, at the schools, but they were just for target practice for quarterbacks, and we would just throw balls at the basketball goal. Throw balls at the basketball.
He's not lying.
It really is. It's like a little slice of Texas carved out and dropped down in a basketball stadium.
Let's go, Coach. That is crazy, man.
If you've never been to Corbin, he is not stretching the truth at all.
You could not grow – if you were an athlete, you could not grow up in that – and I was not a great athlete, but you could not grow up in that town and not just have every desire to one day wear that jersey. And you were like – it was like a little kid going up to college players or pro players when you were a little kid running around there. And you saw those high school guys.
That's why they are what they are.
They were mythical,
I mean, that really is.
Well, and they get players from all over the area, and their dads
we
happen
won't
to move in.
We won't get into that, but
that's how great programs happen.
Oh, it's yes.
Yeah, I was fortunate
to be able
to be able to play there, and it was a great experience. It just taught me a passion for the game. Now, they've won state championships there. They've had some mythical national champions there in the 50s, actually. But I never won a state championship.
Who was your head coach?
Cotton Adams, Larry
Okay.
Adams.
Yeah.
And we didn't win while I was there. They won one right before me, and they won one right after I graduated. And so I was kind of stuck. And honestly, people say, why do you get into coaching? I was headed to law school coming out of college, and I wanted to make a bunch of money. And I just never fulfilled that dream and never got satisfied with what happened on the field, both in high school and in college, because I never won that ring.
Job's not done.
Job wasn't done, and I just felt compelled, I think, to get into coaching, and I still have that hunger.
Wow, unbelievable. And now you said, you played the game, you grew up, the number you wore, did that have a meaning to you?
A little bit. So my brother, who really my dad, my brother was like my father. He was 7 years older than me, and my dad was around a little bit, but my mom and dad divorced like a lot of our parents did. And it was not a horrible situation with my dad, but my brother was really my father figure. And he was the starting quarterback at Corbin, and it was an old school option. I mean, he was a magician with the ball. He didn't throw the ball very much, but you couldn't tell where the ball was. He just knew what he was doing with the ball. And that year they had Steve Bird, who ended up playing in the NFL, and Roy Taylor, and some big names for that area. And they were number one in Lichtgenhaus ratings above St. X Trinity. It was kind of a big deal and very small school. But he played quarterback, and he wore number 5. And around that time, my actual name is Michael Jackson. And I get teased a little bit about that. But I don't know if a coach did it to him or he chose it. But he was always Jackson 5. And so when I came through, I just had to have the number my brother had.
What a phenomenal story. Phenomenal, man.
What year was your brother playing there?
80s, early 80s.
Early 80s, 82,
well, late
82.
70s, actually. He graduated in 80, so 78, 79 were his two.
That was some really good times in the state of Kentucky football.
Yeah,
I mean,
old school.
The teams around here were unbelievable around that time, too. My brother's about that time, 82-ish.
Yeah.
And, he played for Dawson. Trinity beat them in the playoffs. But Corbin was always really good. Yeah. And it's the same teams that are really good to this day. I mean, those county teams, it's a different breed, and it's life or death.
Certain ones of them. And we had a weight program at Corbin before most schools got into weightlifting, and I think that gave us a little bit of an advantage. But it was, it was tough. I mean, it was old school, and you had the same coaches, all the way through Little League. We were in the same system all the way through. But it was a great upbringing if you love football. And back then, now here's the other thing: people don't understand this today. There were districts and there were sub-districts, and only one team from the district got to go to the playoffs. So my brother's team was 9-0 going into the last game with Middlesboro. They were number 1 in the Lichtgenhaus rating, and it was the biggest rivalry, to us. There were 5,000 people, 7 deep it was a great atmosphere. I remember it to this day. And they lost in their last game, and so they didn't make the playoffs.
9-1 and didn't make the playoffs.
And ranked number 1.
We got some teams that are 0-10 making it now.
Exactly, and I wish we were a little bit more like the old days. So.
Yeah, okay, and I was an 0-10 team that played Rondale Moore. So thanks, Coach, for dropping 70 on us in a nice way. And it was a nice way, you know what I mean? But the kid, that's a phenomenal kid. I think he hit 35 points he had on us just by himself.
First
that
half.
game.
There were some games we didn't have to call plays. I mean, it was just get the ball to Rondell.
Oh my God!
He's a special athlete.
Oh man! So man, this podcast has been phenomenal. Now, you have memories playing the game. You know what I mean? You have memories playing or coaching. Tell us one of your favorite memories playing.
Well, I think it goes back probably against Tom Duffy, who I ended up coaching with. We played them when I was in high school. And I had convinced my high school coach, we were just old school. I mean, it was option, power. We had an all-state running back. We had 3 big, huge offensive linemen. When we were going to run the ball. And we could beat almost everybody down around where we were, just 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And we did. But I convinced our head coach to let us have a passing game. Steve Bird, who was at EKU at the time, kind of helped me over the summer and convinced our head coach, We're just going to have a little quick game under center, of course, but it was, hitch and slant and fade, sort of the basic of my pass game right now. But we convinced our coach to let us do that. I worked with 2 or 3 of our kids who were receivers. We only split one guy out, of course, but he became really adept at running those routes. And we played Danville in the first game of the Thoroughbred Bowl, and Danville was a power. I mean, they were a single-A school, but they were, or 2A back then, I guess, but they were legit, and they had Division I players all over the field. And we were fortunate to be in a close game with them, and it got down to 1 minute and 12 seconds or something, and we had the ball in the -20, had to go 80. Well, we weren't going to get there running power and option. And I'll never forget it. I looked over. I start to go out on the field, and I'm kind of backing up to go out, and I'm waiting for Coach to signal a play, and he does that. And he just basically says, take it. And that may be where I got my start in coaching. And him being, trusting me enough to say, you call the plays. And it was kind of like the old, Johnny Unitas stuff back in the 50s.
And of course you threw it.
Oh, we threw slant and hitch and slant and go. And I mixed in a run or two, but we had 3 timeouts and we used them. But it really got me into thinking about tactics as a player. And I hadn't thought of that. I didn't have a game plan. I just called what I thought might work and got real lucky. We took the ball down the field. We got to the 1-yard line, and we're down by less than a score. And all we got to do is score a touchdown. We're on the 1. And he calls a play in when we get down there close. Of course, he's going to call the touchdown play.
Yep.
But we had an all-state running back, and he called a play where I would dive to him. It's simple, right? A-gap, just let our all-state running back fall in the end zone. Well, being the smart guy that I am, he called 39 load, and I thought it was 38, and I opened up to the right. Our whole team went left. Of course, all of Danville's team went left, and I just walked in the end zone. So that probably was kind of a pivotal moment for me that tells it, and it happens today sometimes. Oh, yeah. There will be a play that you call, and you think right before the play's called, oh, why did I call that? That was crazy. They're in the wrong coverage for that play, and your kids
made you right. Made you right.
We had that this year at DeSales time and time again. 3 of our biggest plays this year that won games came from one of our players suggesting something to me. And I've learned enough to say sometimes they know better than I do.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this year's team. I mean, Peyton Moulter, in my opinion, was one of the best quarterbacks in the state. I mean, let's be honest. That kid he really came a long way. And did you see a little bit of yourself in Peyton at times? Peyton was a guy that could, if something went down, he could make it happen.
He throws a lot better than me.
Well,
I don't know that I saw myself in him very much. Peyton did every single living thing that I asked for 2 years, and knowing the first year, and I miscalculated. I made a horrible decision coaching-wise. I'm going to DeSales. They're a running, it's a running program. We're going to run the ball. We're going to run down people's throat. And I know you base what you do on the talent that you have, that you have. And
it's fair to say you had a little more talent this year than you did the year before.
We did, but we had really good kids the year before too. And I think I mismanaged it, to be real honest. And I looked around at the players that we had. We had a kid coming back, and his name's Fott. Of course, that's a great name for DeSales, right? Yeah. And he's a tremendous athlete. Had played quarterback before, being a little bit of an injury, and he couldn't really throw the ball. And he told me, Coach, I don't think I can really do the job at quarterback. Well, that left Peyton. And if I'd done what I should have done, I would have had Luke Fott at a receiver spot, at a slot. I would have had Broderick Price split out, and I would have Brandon Williams, who did a great job for us this year as a junior. We would have used those kids in a passing system, more like what we did at Mill, and had a real good running back. We've been great at the inside zone. But I said, well, we're a running program. I'm going to run the ball and do what I know. And it just didn't fit us. And when we did try to throw, Peyton was on his back a lot. We don't work a whole lot on the pass protection, when you're running the wing T stuff. So Peyton, he just took a beating the whole year, and it's not his fault and not our offensive line's fault, really. It really just was not the right system for the kind of players we had.
I think it made him better.
Well, we switched.
It made him a tough kid.
Oh, it did. We switched at about game 8, and we started scoring. We started putting yards up, and it was kind of like, why didn't I go with my gut? And anyway, I hate it for those kids that graduated that year, but Peyton just went through so much adversity that a lot of kids would have just said, I'm not playing for this guy. That's just, I'm going to get killed.
I'm going to go play baseball.
Yeah. And I had some kids that I know could have played and probably could have been quarterback. And, well, actually, I had one dad of a kid that had transferred us and had played quarterback somewhere else and said, he's not playing for you. I don't want my son getting killed. And he thought he could win the quarterback job. And I know that was the prevailing thought in Peyton's mind also. But Peyton trusted it, and I told him we're going to change the system. We're going to get rid of the ball. You're rarely going to hit the ground. And he trusted it. He trusted his offensive line, and he did the little things that we asked all offseason to make him a quarterback that he hit the ground 6 times this year in the course of a full season.
How many times a year before?
6 times a quarter almost, it seemed like. So he really took to what we asked him to do. And we got receivers that know what they're doing too and did a great job being coached. But Peyton really, he probably improved the most from one year to the next of definitely any quarterback ever coached. But the kid grew up playing offensive lineman. And I went to watch some JV games when I was deciding whether to take the job. And he didn't play much quarterback his sophomore year at DeSales.
Wow.
So that kid has come a long, long way.
Wow, yeah. Because I went live at the J-Town game. Oh, yeah. It was a phenomenal game. But his character at the end was phenomenal, man. I could not, you guys won the game. It was just, if you guys haven't watched it, I clipped it. So go watch the last 5 minutes of that football game. It was phenomenal. But the thing that just clicked was when you guys won, he actually went over to J-Town and congratulated. You know what I mean? Was like, hey, I'm here for you guys, man. That was a wonderful game. You guys played your heart out. The class that kid showed was phenomenal, Coach.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. It's the way the kid was raised. And also, and I know you guys said you wanted to make the podcast more about the coach today. It kills me to do this. I have so many kids and coaches and program and alums that are DeSales. It's really about them, and it's about, you mentioned Peyton. We preach those things, and we teach character, and, we base our program on courage, commitment, and character. And so kids like Peyton, when you come in with those kinds of ideals, which were already at DeSales anyway, they just didn't phrase them that way, but that's who that kid is. And you see it, and it's not surprising at all. That's just who he is.
Yeah.
So I guess the obvious next question is, how do you replace that guy? I mean,
you got any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, that kid was unbelievable. Just on and off the field.
We've got some kids coming up in our program that have done similar kinds of work. They're multi-sport athletes, which we value at DeSales. We're not the kind of school that says, oh, yeah, we'll allow you to play another sport. No, we encourage kids to play other sports. It's more like the old days. I played 3 sports in high school.
Yeah, I love it.
And I want the kids to have that option. We're going to train. We're going to have weightlifting classes during the day that they can still train while they're in their other sport. But we've got some kids coming up. Cameron Bischoff comes to mind. Owen Nutter came out for football first year. He was a baseball kid growing up, and he did a phenomenal job in our JV stuff this year. But Cameron's going to surprise a lot of people. He's not Peyton Malter. Peyton was more of a sit in the pocket kind of passer, and he had timing, he had understanding, and he had anticipation.
I'm going to write this name down because at the end of the year, I'm going to say, remember when you told me about this kid?
Cameron's going to be special. Okay. And he's got the tools that Peyton has. Now, he had an unfortunate injury this year that knocked him out pretty much the whole season. It's part of the reason we had to keep Peyton on his feet.
Right.
But Cameron has the arm talent of Peyton, maybe even a little bit more arm talent, but a little bit more of a gifted, skilled athlete to run the ball a little bit and put some pressure on the defense that way. So it'll change our offense, but for the better. We'll have another weapon back.
So how are your numbers? Are you pretty much where you want to be, or?
We're never where we want to be, I don't think. We want to get back to where they were, when Coach Davis had that great run and he was, there's 90 kids, 95 kids in the program, and I talk to Aaron Donner every day, and we want to get back to that level. And really, when you go through the doldrums like they had a couple of unfortunate years, COVID, a lot of things were out of their control. But, they had a COVID year, and Coach Scroggins passes away. I mean, just some really unfortunate events that happened for the school and for the kids that it really discouraged a lot of the better athletes from coming out and playing football. And some of the best athletes are on the baseball team. And Coach Sievert does a tremendous job.
It's a great program.
Oh, the culture in that program. I just left. I did my workout before I came here. But I had to wait till the weight room was empty because there's 60 kids in there for baseball. Doing medicine ball, circuit training, and real weight training. And that doesn't happen in a lot of baseball programs. But they do a great job. But we think we're going to get some of those kids out. And we start getting some of those baseball kids out to play and add them to the really just gritty kids that we've had in the football program, been willing to go through an 0-10 season and made it through. One of my most proud moments as a coach, you mentioned about proud moments as a player, 0-10 is never fun. And I've been a part of many losing seasons. That's hard, to go through that, keep your kids up. But our coaching staff did a great job. And our seniors that year did such a great job leading, going through 0-10. We started the year with 55 players. And on the bus, 2.5-hour bus ride to Crittenden County for our last game, we had 54 players on the bus. We lost one player. He transferred to a different school.
Wow.
Because of a family situation. Every one of those kids stuck it out. And that, I think, is a testament, like I said, to our assistant coaches who did a great job being mentors and role models and mentoring those kids and really preaching the right things. It's not always about winning. It's a whole lot about winning, but it's also about the character that you develop through adversity.
It's not how you win, it's how you lose sometimes.
Well, sometimes in that year, unfortunately, we had to learn.
Yeah, I was going to ask about your players coming up, but you hit that. You know what I mean? You talked about your staff, So you guys are all set. You guys are you haven't had any additions to your staff or anything like that. You've been pretty solid.
No additions, but, high school football is what it is today. Back when I played, Coach Faulkner was in the building. Coach Ferris was in the building. Coach Burchett was my PE teacher and strength coach. And Coach Adams was the head coach. He was the business teacher. Everybody was in the building, right? Today, I have 2 other coaches in the building. And I've got I'm fortunate to have a staff of 8 guys who they get paid about 35 cents an hour when you break it all down. But they're willing to do that.
They got a raise since I was there.
There you go. But they're incredibly loyal, and they're there. We spread the weight room out for the first 2 years there. It was basically James Atkinson, who was an alum, stayed on board. He was really the first coach that I hired on there. He kind of hired me, as I tell people. We met at Bungalow Joe's and talked through some football stuff, and it was apparent immediately. Him and Matt Corbett. Matt Corbett stayed on from the previous staff, which is important to have continuity.
Is Matt still there?
Matt needed to do some stuff with his own kids, kind of what happened with me.
Matt's a great guy. Yeah. I coach with Matt over there. Matt's a great guy.
Tremendous guy.
He's
and kind of like what happened with me about
player.
Yeah. Oh, I heard. Yeah. He's kind of an option quarterback. But anyway, pretty much the same staff. But we're able to kind of spread the weight room duties out this year. I'm in the weight room every day, and those assistants, I say, come one day a week, just have contact with the kids, but we're able to spread that out. I've got 3 other coaches there besides myself every day, and that's great. The continuity from one year to the next, we hadn't had that the first 2 years.
Yeah, and that was my next question is, like, what do you think flipped from that 0-10 to last year?
Well, there were a couple things. I mean, some of it was the strategy. And people say it's the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's. Well, it's a little bit of both.
Right.
And we did change our offensive scheme. I hired a new defensive coordinator that had been with me at Oldham County, Rick Young. Had an addition of Ross Brown on the staff, who had been the head coach at Elizabethtown. He was just in a state championship game 2 years previous. He shored up all of our pass coverage stuff on defense, and Rick sort of took more of the shell. But they allowed me to kind of get away from the defensive side and concentrate on those things. And they're tremendous men. Billy Dishman, who is a Dishman, right?
That's Chris's brother, correct?
Right, yeah. So Billy joined our staff this year, was a great addition, just got that DeSales blood back on the staff, which we had a few the year before. Joe Gatewood was on a part-time member of our staff. But just some tremendous high school coaches, who could be coaching at another level. So I'm very, very blessed. But so a lot of it had to do with that. But the biggest thing, I think, more than anything, we were just healthy this year. So the previous year, we had kids that we averaged 800 yards. Each of our main receivers averaged 800 yards had over 800 yards for the season receiving. None of those 3 kids played the full year last year.
Wow.
Our top kid, or basically our number 1 statistical receiver this year, Broderick Price, just committed to Center College. Mm-hmm. He got injured in the PRP game. I had him at running back. Should have had him out at receiver. He got injured, broke his ankle, done for the year. Brandon Williams was out the second game of the year, had a broken bone, two breaks in one of his vertebrae, played through it for 3 games, and we finally found it with an MRI and decided he can't play the rest of that year. And then Davon Martin, who was a phenomenal player for us this year, he had transferred in, so he couldn't even play till the 8th game of the year. And we had all 3 of those kids this year. They were all 3 pretty much healthy the whole year. And there's a lot to be said for that. But it goes back to the weight room work. It goes back to the dedication, the commitment they showed in the offseason to doing the silly band exercises.
It's amazing. 0-10 to 9-3, right? 9-3 this year.
Yeah.
Something this small can make that big of a difference.
It wasn't just.
I mean, you say injuries are terrible. I mean, at a small school like DeSales, with what? How many kids? 35.
300.
I mean, 35 on the football team.
Oh yeah. Well, no, we were about 55.
55. I mean, a couple of injuries are devastating because I'm sure you got kids going both ways. And,
we played 4 freshmen.
I mean, that's. Yeah.
And the other thing was our schedule changed this year. I mean, when I got in there and I saw the schedule, it was North Hardin, Central Hardin, Meade County. It was all 6A schools except for our district. And, we were just at the point where with injuries, but then also with the COVID stuff and the baseball kids choosing not to play and all that, we were down to some games. Our first district game against Henry County, I really thought we had a chance. We've been seasoned against all these 6A teams. We had 10 kids out for injury, 10 starters that were offense or defensive starters, key players that were out that game.
That's what, 20% of your roster?
Well,
that's crazy.
It was crazy. I'd never gone through that before. So our kids just made the commitment this year. It wasn't me. Our schedule did change. That helped. We play teams more, kind of at the level where we were after those couple of years. But, you don't just change the schedule and win all of a sudden, And our kids had to execute on the field. And they did. They did everything we asked them to do.
Well, you've done a great job of getting them to buy in, and because it was kind of going down, and you could see it going down, and then to hit that 0-10, and then to be able to bring it back to 9-3. That's, I don't care who you are. That is a masterful job of, number one, motivating. Number two, keeping them interested. I mean, keeping those kids interested when they're 0-10. Like you said, you lost one kid. That's a testament to you and your staff's job keeping those kids around, because you could have very easily had 20 kids jump ship.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I do know the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink.
That's right.
And I did all of the tried to push all the little buttons you push to keep those kids interested and involved and working in the off season and trying to sell them on, you got to stay healthy, and here's how you stay healthy. And I can lead them there, but unless we had the kind of kids with the kind of character and the parents that we've got who are gritty, and I told them at the banquet, I said, this season, a lot of it's because of you and pushing your kid to keep going, even when they get hurt a little bit, and tell them to rub some dirt on it.
That's DeSales kids in a nutshell.
I love that.
Kids have already been hard-nosed and work hard, and that's just who they are.
Amen.
Man, one last question, Coach. You got anything for Coach?
No. I'm
okay, one last question.
This, man, this is great.
What's one thing that you learned about yourself this season?
I think I kind of alluded to it a minute ago, and it's that sometimes you've got to pull back on what you think is right and what you know. And we've always heard in coaches and in clinics, you got to do what you know. You got to do what you know. And what I really know is the wing tee. I mean, I can teach quarterbacks how to hide the ball. I know how to attack any kind of defense in a run game, especially the gap scheme stuff. But if it's not the right thing to fit your kids, you've got to be willing to make some changes. And I am nowhere near the category of Nick Saban, but somebody was a little bit critical of what we were trying to do at DeSales, and I understand that because we weren't very successful. And I'm not from DeSales, and it's a common thing to want to get somebody that's been there.
Yes.
And I think the thinking is they'll care about it more because they're from there. And I don't know if anybody can care about it more than I do or spend more time than I do at it, but I love it, and I love DeSales. But Nick Saban was not an Alabama guy, and he was an old-school run-the-ball, time of possession, great defense coach, right? And got to a point, they were a little bit stagnant, and they were still really, really good, and he obviously knew football inside and out.
Right.
But he made a decision. I got to do something different. Hires Lane Kiffin, brings in McElroy. They start throwing the ball. They go RPO, but they do it at a precise level because it's Nick Saban. He took all of the old way that he coaches and just installed it with a different package. And I think I was wrapped up too much in what I thought I knew so well. It's bigger than me. The game's bigger than anyone.
It's not always
coach.
about the coach. I mean, and that's hard for a guy that we have done it as long as we have. It's really hard to get out of that mode. If this is what I do. By God, we're going to do this, and we're going to be good at it. And like it goes back once again, masterful job of adapting and overcoming. I mean, you had to do what you had to do, and you were big enough to do it. And look, I mean, it paid off. 9-3 is a great year, and sky's the limit for DeSales.
All credit to our kids and coaches and our administration who believed in us. So
yeah, I thank you very much, Coach. This was a really, really great episode. I appreciate your time. I know we had a little light issue, had to figure it out.
That makes it exciting, I want to say one other thing before I go, and I always do this because you don't play at a place like Corbin or you don't coach at a place like DeSales unless you understand what the legacy of the place is about.
Absolutely.
And the alumni. And I totally understand it, that people were hesitant about me coming in as a coach. It doesn't matter what my record was. There are great men that had coached here before me that could have done a better job than I did. But for whatever reason, I was the guy that got this job. There were some alums, they had to be, they had to come along.
Absolutely.
But we have had great support from our alums and the brown and white, and these kids getting these guys coming back. We had more alums coming back this year and talk to our kids about here's what it was like when I went here. Here's what our traditions were about. And our kids want to carry those things on. And it is a new generation. It's a little bit different. Man, they need to be in touch with the way things used to be and why DeSales football was what it was.
It's a proud place, and it's a great place. Yeah. And when you've got the alumni behind you, you've got it. Yeah. You've done your job.
Well, we've got a great group of kids there now, but there's a great group of brown and white out there in the community, and we're excited about it. But we're really excited about it.
I'm excited.
That's why I said this whole podcast, man, I've just been fired up because it's just like just listening to you talk. I'm like, what a great leader that DeSales has, man. If you are watching this guy is bought in. He's ready to roll, and he's just bringing you nothing but his knowledge of the game and just the fieriness. It's phenomenal, Coach. But I appreciate you very, very much for coming on. Like I always say, everyone has a story.
We're here for them to tell it.
Cleats. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing for high school football.
Appreciate that.
Cleats to Whistle podcast.